I will start the recording. Also, I'd like to go quickly through quick house rules. So I'm going to share my first screen. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. We have three distinguished presenters today, Alyssa, Brad, and Rebecca. Teaser for next month. We have 4 lined up already for April 12th. Going next. The structure or the format of the sessions will be, the session will be 60 minutes. Typically, we have 3 to 4 presenters. Each has 4 minutes to present their work, followed by 5 minutes Q&A. Then the presentation will be self-paced. Derek will provide us the 9 minutes warning when you come up against your 10 minutes. And then at the end of the 10 minutes, we're going to have 5 minutes discussion of Q&A for every presentation. And then at the end, if there's more time, we can go and provide room for discussion or questions about anything on your mind. I will pass the share now to Alyssa because she has a wonderful presentation that includes clips which did not come through on my presentation. So Alyssa.
Okay, thanks, Zvi. And Zvi is our secretary, in case anybody did not know that. He did not introduce himself. Okay, good. So can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. So I thought about a lot of different things and how I would present tonight. And I just thought it'd be fun. Mostly people ask me, you know, how do you make this happen? How do you do it? So I thought we'd talk a little bit about, I'd run you through one sculpture that I did because I started taking pictures before, during, and after to see. So I submitted a piece to the show through American Women Artists, and they have this beautiful museum at Stockton, California, the Hagen Museum. And their requirement was to create a piece based on one of their 13 pieces in their permanent collection. So I was sort of looking through all their pieces, and they had like scenes of France and the Arc de Triomphe, and they had just nothing that I could sculpt. And then I came upon this picture and I thought, oh my God, this would be awesome. So I decided I was going to sculpt a ram's head, which I had never done before. So can you see the images to the right? Because I know people's screens are there. So if you can't, I think you can have an option to change how everybody's in the waiting room here or in the audience. So anyway, I started with the stone over here and just started sketching it, and you can kind of see it starting to come to life. And I have a little video to show you, and it's not of this piece, but I just wanted to show you some of the process. So they're not very long. They're kind of fun. I have this table that my husband made for me that goes up and down, which is lovely. And I start with hammering and chiseling. So we don't have to go through any more of that, but you get the idea. It takes time. Okay, so let's stop that and go to the next screen. So now I started working some more, and you can see it's starting to take a little bit more shape. And I've learned a lot over the years in sculpting. And one of the things I learned was not to take anything away that should stay attached, that'll be really thin, that may break in the process. So in every piece, you'll see that where's my little cursor? Oh, it disappeared on me here. Oh, here it is. Anyway, you'll see by the horn, it's still connected to the face. And that's the last thing after I just created the whole thing. That was like the last thing as I cut this tiny little post I had left. It kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller as I went along. And then you can see some of my tools. I have hammer and chisels. I have files, rasps that I use, starting with a more heavy duty one and finer and finer and finer as I go. So that helps with less sanding in the end. I don't know if you still can see, not the post yet, but so anyway, it's taken more shape. You can see how the horn's coming out. And I also decided that I felt like the piece shouldn't, so part of the creative process is what else to do to it. So I really felt like the piece should not have a lot more detail and have the horn just really be the predominant feature in it. So I chose not to have eyes or more. So now when I try to get into a circular place in the stone, it's very hard to do with the hammer and chisel and make it come out really round. So I have this instrument called a fordum, which has a hose, and maybe I'll play that one more time. It has a hose that is, hold on a sec, sorry. Oh my goodness, sorry. That has a motor that hangs from the ceiling, and it has this hose, and it has all these different drill bits that go into it. And so you can see I'm trying to dig that space out. Again, hammering chisel that, I probably would have broken it. And I dropped the phone also. So that's why. Okay. So you can see how it's still connected. You can see that piece right here where it's still connected. That's again what I've left because like I said, I know myself and I've broken pieces along the way before. So. And it's looking a little better because I've actually put water on it. So you get to see the color of the stone a little bit more, which doesn't come through until you start working with it. I have this little video just to show see if I can not put. Yeah, I'm just sort of talking about the refinement of things just at the very end. What you can do with a file and how you can really change a line. And a simple thing. So it's sort of like drawing on the stone. Yeah, so that was just sort of some technique stuff that I've learned where I'm really attempting to make a line stand out more or really shape it nicely so that it you can follow through with what the piece is trying to be. And so it got into the show. I was very excited about that. This is the final product. And I actually won a $1,000 award for best sculpture and show, which was really, really, really fun. And then I have one more last little video because everything's not done yet. Oh, to get to this stage, this particular piece, I just sat on a base, but in a lot of my other pieces, I've pinned them so you can, you know, it attaches to the base. So there's that whole idea of like, you know, what are you going to put it on and how are you going to put it on the base? And is it going to stand up on a post? Is it going to be flat on the base? There's so many decisions along the way to be made. So that's also part of the fun of it all. But then at the end, you actually have to send it somewhere. So here's my little short video of packing it up and cutting all the different pieces of foam that I have and the instructions because they want instructions about how to take it out. And off she's going to California. And that's it. So I think that is, yep, that's the end of my presentation. So I will stop sharing. Great. And I'm happy to, maybe you can unmute everybody. I'm happy to, people can unmute if you have a question, or I'm happy to talk about whatever you would like.
Was the ram's head alabaster or marble?
That was actually soapstone.
Soapstone.
Mm-hmm.
What's your ventilation like in your area? Where do you work? Is it in like your house or do you have or your garage or like?
No, I have a home studio in the basement. And early on, my husband's a contractor, so we have enough wood dust in our house, but he has this whole filtration system and I didn't want to add stone dust to the house because I'm forever dusting. So I have something called a downdraft table, which is probably, I don't know, 4 feet wide by 3 feet deep. And it actually, when you turn it on, it actually sucks it down. It's a table that has vents on it and it actually sucks down all the dust as I'm making it. And especially when I'm using the fordum or I'm using other tools for marble that are diamond bit tools that tend to take a lot more away at one time. It's really dusty. I can come out of there looking like Pigpen. I mean, I shake my head, I take my clothes off and dust is coming out of all parts and don't even know how it gets in there, but
Yeah.
so I think it's pretty good, but I definitely wear a mask, you know, and I'm having, because that's loud and the Fordham is loud, so I'm having ear protection and I look crazy. And now I'm wearing a hat because the other day I was working so much that all the dust got in my hair and I went to take a shower and it was like cement. I had to wash my hair 5 times. So now I wear a hat and then I have my, you have to get the order. I have my mask on and then my glasses on because I can't see, my goggles on top of that, my headphones on top of that. My doctor's coat. It's the only time I wear a doctor's coat is there in my studio, but so.
Congratulations on winning a prize, and the Ram hat looks
Thank you.
fantastic.
Yeah,
Yes.
I was really thrilled. That was exciting.
Do you start with a square block when you start, or is it just a chunk or?
Sometimes it's square and I don't like that because I really, sometimes, mostly the stone tells me what to do, right?
Mhm.
And so I don't, when it's a blank slate like that, I'm like, oh my God, I have no idea what to do with this. But sometimes when I send away for a stone, I either go to New York and buy my stones, or sometimes I just can't get down there. I say, send me a 60-pound stone of alabaster that's white, you know, and sometimes that is what they send me. So it's a little hard.
So is this one from a square block or?
That one sort of was a moundy shape. So that it was the stone I had best to suit that piece. And having it being soapstone was a little nicer because it worked up a little bit easier than alabaster.
Do you finish it with anything when you're done?
Yes, I start sanding usually at 100 grit, and then depending on how much of a sheen I want, it can go up to 1500. So it's 100, 220, 320, 400, 600, 800, 12, 1200, 1500. So it's a lot of sanding, and that is all done by hand.
And do you seal it afterwards or?
Yeah, and then I do with a Akimi oil or Akimi
Okay.
wax. Yeah, on my alabaster. I'm trying to figure out what the best thing is for marbles. So if anybody has a thought about that, that'd be great.
So Elisa, I've just played with alabaster bits. The soapstone's a little bit harder or a little less?
It's softer. And
Yes.
alabaster has a range from soapstone all the way up to marble. So it depends on the type of alabaster you get.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you know right off the bat that something is fragile, that you'll have to work around it to keep it attached?
Yes, when I was first doing this, I was known in the studio as the queen of glue. And I've since learned that usually if something breaks off, that something better is going to come. So I don't glue things anymore. Soapstone is fragile. I'm not really hammering hard on that. There's an orange alabaster that has veins that are actually made out of, that have mud in them. So I have to be very careful of that alabaster. That cracks really easily. So yeah, and I've learned, and actually I've learned to listen to the stone a lot more now too, which it makes different sounds. And I'm like, oh gosh, that's really close to something being bad. And so I can hear that, then I'll stop hammering, chiseling, and maybe I'll use my Fordham or I'll file more at that point. Good
I
question.
could see the stone. I'm on my phone, and when I flipped it vertical, I could see everything, that you and the stone and the piece.
Uh-huh.
But horizontal, the view of you blocked the stone.
Oh,
So,
that's too bad.
yeah. No, it's fine. All I did was flip it, and
Okay.
I see everything. So just so you know.
Great.
Alyssa, I just want to say it's an absolutely stunning piece.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
And congratulations. I just love the finish. I just, what you did with the stone was just really stunning. And I like that whole listening thing. I understand what you're talking about, but congratulations.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you so much. Yeah, it was really fun. It was a little, I'm a person that looks a little more symmetry. So to have one horn and not have the other was a little distressing to me, but I think ultimately, actually, it was quite nice how it turned out. So.
Okay, thank you. Any
Thank
more
you, guys.
question? Maybe
Good
we'll wait till
questions.
the end if we have more time. Okay, let's move on.
Thank you.
Lisa, let's move on to the next presentation. To do that, I need to share the presentation. Can you see that? Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Move all the way down to Brent.
There we are.
Here we go.
So I wanted to start with the notion of doing this project today. Got me thinking retrospectively about how the hell did I get into sculpture in the first place? And there's a little bit more to it than prior to this, but this is going back to 1970. And I was at a school in Burkittsville, Ohio, a Summerhillian school that was highly political, and it was for students, Black students out of the inner city who had been sent off to this school to try to get them out of the city because it wasn't safe. And it was a crazy place. And at some point I was in the basement of this school that I was in, and I found some clay, powdered clay. And I put some water with it, and I started making some clay that I could actually mold. And those two heads came up. And one, I recommended, it wasn't a plan. They came up first, the convict, which was actually a standing figure with his hands tied behind his back wearing a monk's robe. And then the head, who was clearly the judge. Gives you a sense of my psychology at the time. And really, I mean, I mentioned this because my sculpture to me has been very much an experiential process. I didn't want to be a sculptor. I wasn't planning stuff. I don't sculpt with an idea, oh, I'm going to go create this particular thing and make this particular thing look this particular way. I get my hands in the clay and I see what comes out. That was back then. Some years later, many years later, with a whole different history along the way, I started getting some private instruction on being able to sculpt portraits. I actually, excuse me, going back to 74, I went off to the museum school and went to a class on sculpture, on figurative sculpture. And I loved doing heads. And they didn't want you to do heads initially. They wanted you to do arms and legs and torsos and all kinds of stuff. So I would do those. And the instructor was very kind. He would put up with me because I'd do an arm or a leg or a torso. And then by the time he got to my table, I was already making more heads. So eventually he did the official head and gave us an official model for doing a head. And this is this is actually plasticine clay that I have carried around with me literally around the world, and probably to about 20 or 30 different domiciles in that time from 1974. And it's still, I carry it with me. So that gives you a sense of that one. If you go to the next one. Next slide, that would be good. There we go. Going forward, 2004, I wanted to learn how to do portraits. I finally gave myself permission to go get some private instruction on that. And I ended up marrying the teacher, but that was my first head. It was done in a weekend. I was supposed to do 2 hours session. I spent 6 hours the first day and 4 hours the second day. And then that came out of it. And eventually it got fired and got painted. And that's a painted version. And what you see next to it is my first live model. That's a fired clay. Eventually a couple of years later, got into glass, and the two pieces on the left, that the woman is my first cast glass piece that I just made. I was at Corning Museum School. I quickly put together a plasticine head, and that became the basis for that particular piece. And that was my first head that I actually created and fired real time, and produced while I was at Corning. The other piece, the actual sculpting of that, was done by Eugene Daub, who I had as an instructor, and he's a friend of mine now. He had done the clay for that in a session I had with him. And so I got his approval, and I went ahead and made a mold of it and did a wax and carried that to Corning with me and cast that there. And that is about 17 inches square. And it weighs about 20 pounds of cast lead crystal, a relief. The one up in the top right-hand corner was the first piece of mine. It came from a water-based clay ceramic piece. The original had mold made, sent the mold and did a wax, sent the wax to the Czech Republic, and that was cast in Železný Brod, Czech Republic, back in 2006, I think it was, something like that, 2007. That's about 90 pounds of cast glass, solid glass. you want to go to the next one, give you a sense, that was the one on the left is the original ceramic version. I took the original clay, fired it, it shrank by about 15%, and then went ahead and painted it, et cetera. It has sort of a bronze kind of look. And you can see the different dynamic of glass versus ceramic. Okay, want to jump to the next one. Just some other pieces of glass, different periods. The top left was another version of a different casting of the original one I did at Corning. I took the clay, did some other stuff with it, added to it, remolded it, recast it in glass myself, and that's that one. The bottom left was done in Zelezny Brod. The one in the middle was done in Zelezny Brod. The one in the top right was my first portrait in relief that I had done on a commission, and that's in cast crystal. That's about 20 inches tall by about 13 inches wide by about at the base by about 3.5 inches deep, less deep at the top, designed to kind of be at a bit of an angle. There's a longer story that I won't put it here. And the bottom one was another portrait that I did. This was of the first executive director of the Corning Museum of Glass. He had been the associate director of the Met in New York, and he had gotten recruited in the early 50s to put the Museum of Glass together. And he did it in something like 20 months to design it, have it built, and get all the glass work and everything loaded into it. And it was just an amazing feat. But he's a cool guy by the name Bickner, Tim Bickner, and I managed to get this portrait to him, but he didn't know about. I got this portrait, cast it myself, and then sent it to him, and he got this. I got a nice note from him, and 2 months later, he had a heart attack and died. So it was, but it was a wonderful closure for us. So I had met him when I was at Corning. If you come to the next one, and by the way, I'm letting you know the retrospective bit of this, but I've got at the end of this, I've got a real big question for you. Where do I go next? So that's where this is teeing up. Part of what I started dealing with was not only portraits in terms of dealing with a portrait of somebody, but it really started becoming, and heads, it was characters, it was people coming out of the clay. I had no idea who was going to show up or what the content was going to be. Sometimes I had a sense of maybe something that leaned, or was this or that. That's the only place that I started. And if I needed an armature, I just gave enough of an armature to give me a starting place to stick the clay on it, and then went from there. So these are some different figures. The top left is a bronze. It was the first bronze I did. That's basically life size. It's probably about 80%, 90% life size. The ones on the bottom, the small ones, are those heads. Each of the heads is maybe 2.5 inches tall. The one in the middle, the tall one in the middle, is about 27 inches tall. The one on the far right is about 19 inches tall. The one on the wall with sort of the crown, the headdress, is about 20 inches tall, and that hangs on the wall. Those, the ones that look like bronze are actually resin, and my friend Pete was extraordinarily helpful in teaching me about casting resin and molds and all the other different stuff, playing around with that stuff. The ones on the bottom are all ceramic, still in the ceramic form. You jump to the next one. Interesting. Oh, the one that says #1 portrait didn't actually show up. The photograph is missing. Well, there you go. That isn't actually the #1 photograph. At some point, I'll share the other one with you. But it was of a friend of mine, who an old school chum of mine, and it was literally the first portrait I did. It's actually it turned out pretty well. He didn't know I was doing it for him. I had a couple little teeny photographs, but it was just, I know the guy really well, and I just did it of him without him knowing about it. This other one are some of the first 2 portraits I did in relief. One would hope that you kind of recognize that it might be MLK, and the one on the bottom is just showing the benefit of doing cropping, and how you can have a very different feel if you do a crop versus the full head. We can jump to the next one. Some more recent portraits. Some of those people you might recollect and recognize. the young lady at the top, I think there are a couple other portraits that might have been on the original photograph thing, but they're not on there. But the baby, that was a labor of love. That's I feel really good about it. It almost looks to me like a cameo, but that piece is life size. So just to give you a sense of scale, the one of Stacey Abrams is a new commission, and that piece is about, with the base, is about 9 inches tall. And our state senator, our senator, one of our senators from Massachusetts below. And again, those are all resin based. The one on the bottom is got marble powder in resin, and the one of Stacey Abrams was bonded bronze, so it's about 1/3 bronze powder, and the one on the left is just resin, but with a tint in the resin. You go to the next one. A new outcropping of. I went from heads to a different kind of head. It started off with my dog in the left-hand corner, who I missed because he was still living in Norway and I was back here in the States. So I took a photograph of him and did a very fast sketch relief of him, and then painted it with bronze coated paint and some different wax patinas and stuff. So that's boy. And then the cats have started showing up as 2 different commissions. And that this is important because this is where we're going to be heading next with my big question. So if you go to the next one, for love or money, I'm at a point where income is going to be more important to me. And the question is, and some of these have been done on commissions and stuff like that, but I noticed that when I'm doing a commission, I start feeling a lot of the word should and ought to and worry and anxiety about will the client like it, and are concerned about this, and oh, I ought to go do this, and I ought to work on it, and I ought to work. There's this ought to and should and anxiety attached to it. And as opposed to the other stuff, which is just a creative thing where I can't keep my hands off it. I just keep going back in the room time after time, just keep editing the pieces because you're waiting for the person to come out. Who's coming out of the clay today? So that's
that's about 9 minutes.
And there you go, perfect timing. So questions and answers, whatever questions you have, and also what effort into billable commission type work versus just doing it for the fun of it.
I have a question. I love your hats, the smaller ones, especially. Are they for sale?
They could be. I mean, I've got the molds. Let's put it that way.
You have
those were commissioned. So the process was that the clients would pick a photograph of their cat that they loved the most, that most represented that cat.
The heads, the smaller heads.
Oh, the heads are, yeah, the heads are definitely for sale.
Oh, good. Well, we should.
So just talk to me anytime, get contact with, it's great. Definitely happy to talk with you about that.
B, can you put Brad's email address in the chat box for her?
Actually, I can do that. I can do that.
I'll do that. Yeah.
Well, thanks. Appreciate that. Thanks, Natasha.
So I'm going to say something about your clients, Brad, and then I have another question. So I'm going to start from the last question. I think that, if people search you out, they love your style, like they've connected with you in some way by what they've seen. And so, you should just I know the money's important, but if they've chosen you, they've seen your métier, and you should just maybe fortify how creative you are, and just to sort of let them settle in and know whatever you do is going to be your style, your interpretation. I mean, if they're looking for perfection and a mirror image, I mean, actually, you're really great, by the way. I mean, you're very good at capturing the essence of a face. So, I mean, I think from what I've seen, your clients, you should just sort of, be confident about your background, what you've accomplished, and just let them know that you are the one in charge. And yeah, you need a bit of creative what's the word? Power, or that's a big word, not the word I wanted, but I think that you should just let them know if they picked you, they are going to trust you. And you just need to bridge that moment.
Appreciate that, Karen.
I love your pets. I do have one question. I wrote it down because I work in many materials, but the glass is fascinating to me. And I will maybe email you separately about, I have a couple of questions about the glass. I don't want to take up too much in the room, but.
Feel free to reach out.
Okay, thank you, and great work. Nice presentation.
Thank you. Really appreciate it, Karen.
Brad, where do you cast the resin pieces?
I cast the resin pieces either in my little studio here in my house, or I go hang out with Pete and we go have some fun together over in his studio.
Gotcha.
Pete's the man.
There he is.
Oh yeah, about the casting glass. So you still cast those huge pieces, which are nice?
Okay, yeah, so the basic story on the glass, on the pieces and stuff, the big pieces we had cast, my wife is a professional sculptor, and we had, that's the big stuff cast in the Czech Republic because they're really good at it. And it was like the basis of the studio glass movement, and the studio that you cast that stuff was the studio that Brichtova and Lebinsky and Brichtova, that was their old studio, and that was their casting place. And so it's a really cool, and so that just made a lot of sense. But we learned how to do the smaller stuff. So we would do pieces as tall as maybe about 18, 19 inches tall, standing figures and things along that line. But when it got bigger, the problem with glass is like that big head, the big guy, that is heroic size. It's a little bit bigger than life size. That was in a kiln for 7 weeks.
No way.
It took a day and a half to melt the glass into the mold, and all the rest was computer controlled cooling process.
I mean, what kind of cost is that? Or, I mean, do you have any idea?
I don't know what it is now. That piece cost about, as I recollect, it was about $2,500 to $3,000 to cast.
Oh, but when was that?
That was like 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So their prices have gone up for sure, but the dollar and the it's all a question of the dollar versus the krona. It's a big issue there. Here, the other ones, it's a function of having a kiln that has a computer controller, again, for cooling glass is the big issue. So how to get the glass to anneal is the big issue. And so you need a computer controller for that. You're basically using a ceramic kind of kiln, but with a computer controller controlling all the levels in the cooling process.
How long do you annealing your pieces here?
Well, like the small head takes about a week. So that's so it takes about a day it takes something less than a day to go ahead and melt the glass into it. All the rest of that is the cooling process, the annealing process in the kiln, to let the heat out of the glass, because otherwise the glass will not adhere to itself. And you open the thing up, and I actually know a quick story. Piece looked gorgeous. It wasn't mine, thank God. Piece looked gorgeous. The client loved it. They bought it. They had it up. And one day, 2 years after they had it in a window where they had it all this time. And the sunlight had been coming in on it like it always had been. And the sunlight had been hot enough, and it had heated up the inside of the glass, and it hadn't fully annealed. And the inside of the glass caused the whole thing to just, and the guy was in a different room, and he heard this. He walked back into the living room, and his entire piece was in little pieces of shards of glass on the floor.
It shattered, but it didn't explode. It
didn't explode. It just cracked and fell apart.
Crazy.
So
because it didn't anneal enough. Yeah.
The process that they used for annealing just wasn't quite adequate for the particular piece. And so I learned how to anneal the smaller stuff well enough, but the bigger stuff I didn't want to let the pros do it. I have some people in Massachusetts, if anybody's interested, some people who are excellent at doing casting glass. So if you have a piece and you want to know how to go from a piece to a mold to a wax, as opposed to a resin, go to a wax, give the guy the wax they have the capability of then going ahead and casting that in glass. So
So
if you're
they will
interested
make a
in- let me
mold.
know. Pardon?
They will make a mold.
They-
Or we
Well,
have
some
to
of them, you talk to them, at least one of them would probably make the silicon mold and do the wax for you too. But these people exist.
I'll have to move again. My family is chasing me everywhere. Just
All
muting
right,
my-
as timekeeper, I guess we should probably move on and get to Rebecca, and we can, if we have
Okay.
time after.
Thank you, Brad.
Right.
Thanks a
Thanks,
lot.
Brad. Thanks.
Thank you, Brad.
Thanks for the questions and thanks for the advice, Karen, too.
Let's move, least not last, Rebecca. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. You tell me when to move. Oops.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. So hello, everybody. I am fairly new to the New England Sculptors Association, and I have been working from my studio here in Framingham for just since 2019, when I went back to college that I started in 1990 and didn't finish. And so then I went back in 2016 to finish it with all the 20-year-olds. You can go to the next. So I have pretty much three different, I guess, three different phases or three different groupings of work that I work on. And the first one that I'll talk about is called Along the Rack Line. You can go to the next one. So I am a found object artist. I'm a collector, an assemblage sculptor, whatever you would like to call it. I have a lot of different skills that I try out. I'm a welder, I can weave, and I just like having a lot of skills in my tool set to kind of use to connect things. So these three pieces here are three different pieces of work that I use, that I've made with found sea debris that I collect along the rack line, which is the line of, if you're walking on along the beach, it's the line of debris left by the high tide watermark. And that's where everything gets deposited. And that's where I find bait bags and fishing line and rope, trash, plastic, balloons, everything. And these three pieces represent the spectrum and the colors of things that I collect and use. So you can go to the next slide. So I had a solo show at Arts Worcester last year, and in it, it was my first solo show. It was very exciting, and in it I was able to show all the work that I've made with my sea debris that I collect. And the giant sculpture you see there is called Happy Birthday Ocean, and it's made with all the balloons that I collect. Every time I go to the beach, I'm there every day in the summer and once a week still throughout the year. And I collect and I collect. And every time I walk the beach, I find balloons, inevitably 3 to 5 at every time I go there. And so I was trying to figure out what to do with them, and I needed kind of a showpiece for my show. And so I created this giant jellyfish. It's quilted at the top, and it contains all sorts of debris that I find. You can go to the next slide. That's me standing on the beach collecting in the winter. And this is another type of sculpture I make, which is with a bunch of the netting are bait bags that lobstermen use in their traps to have the bait to attract the lobster. And everything that you see in these pieces could be like, occasionally I'll take the bait bags, and as I walk, I'll fill them up. And that might be a way that I make a sculpture for the day. Kind of like marking the day of my walks through the bait bags that I collect. You can go to the next slide. So that was the series of sea debris sculpture that I do. And the next kind of thing that I think of myself as is a public a public sculpture or a community art sculptor. So one of the pieces that I've made starting in 2018, I made the piece on the left. It's called the Clootie Wishing Tree, or it's based on a Celtic tradition of going to a Clootie well and bringing a piece of material with you and dipping it into the well and tying it to a tree nearby the well and giving a wish or a prayer for the person that you're thinking of. So I have been using this Clootie tree. Right now it's at the Custom House Maritime Museum in Newburyport. But I've been using it at many events. I had it at the Art Ramble in Concord. I've had it in Hopkinton, all over the place. And every time I bring it somewhere, there's a new grouping of wishes and hopes that people add to it. So I'm excited to go pick it up in March to see what it's become, because it's always different. And the piece on the right is also in Newburyport, actually, behind the Newburyport Art Association. And that was called Double Vision. And it's made with steel, that I welded steel, and it's all, I collected videotapes and clothing and plastic trash from people and made this sculpture actually it was for a show called Studio Without Walls that was at the Fenway, and then now it's in Newburyport. You can go to the next slide. So this piece is called Airing Out the House, and it was at the Art Ramble last year in Concord, in the woods in Concord. And it's made with a found bed spring and a welded steel frame that I made. And then I weaved plastic bags all through the bottom. That's what the colorful part is. And the top is all made with VCR tape from people to give me a bunch of their VCR tapes that I took apart, and I put them for like the fun movement part of that piece. You can go to the next one. And this is other kinds of public art that I do. I did a door project that's very interactive, where there was different components to it where people can weave or leave leaves, or I asked what their favorite food was. Like, I just like pieces that like engage people or make them interact with it. And the three masks on the left were kind of in response to COVID. They were masks, but they were also masks for the earth and the wind and fire. I mean, earth, wind, and the sea, sorry. Next, next slide. This piece right here is currently at Fenway Park in Gate A, and it'll be there for pretty much in part of the spring season, but it's a collaborative piece I made with Jamal, my friend Jamal Eversley, and I created this tree and all the leaves, and he painted the really cool design on the outside, and it was a very fun project. And if you're at Fenway, go see it. It's there. And I'm hurrying because I feel like I'm taking a long time, but go to the next slide. And then my last grouping of work that I do is what I like to call memory shrine work, where I collect textiles from people that hold memories for them or hold that they care about. So this piece, Tabernacle of Trappings, during COVID, I had people send through the mail bits of materials that were important to them. So people sent me their wedding dress, their father's ties, their baby blankets, little pieces of it. And I hand sewed it all to this memory shrine piece, which I really like. Unfortunately, I only had it for about 5 months and I sold it. So it was never in my possession for more than 5 months. So I barely know it. It's weird, but go to the next slide. And this piece I made during the pandemic. It's called the Pandemic House. That's to show scale. That's most of my family minus one of my sons. It's made, it's a welded steel frame, and each side is a panel, a quilt that I made of from clothing with the people that I was quarantined with. There's 400 coffee filters that I sewed together. You'll see them over kind of here. or you can't see my cursor, but, and just all the things that I found within my house, because I couldn't go to my studio, I couldn't go any, you know, you were there too, so you know, you couldn't go anywhere. So every piece of material in this piece I used from in my house. And
Sorry,
go to the
Becca,
next.
that's 9 minutes.
Okay. And then very last, this is Giacometti's hat. This is another sort of conglomeration of stuff. And then go to the next piece, the next one. And I do a lot of crazy quilts. So this was from the Clooney tree you saw. One of the Clooney trees I sent out was for the 2020 graduation, and I collected all the wishes and I made it into a this giant quilt, and it was hanging in the library in our Natick. And I think that's the last one, but you can go to the next slide. And that's a show I had this August with all my kind of fiber pieces in it. And I hope that was good. So
Good timing. That's it. That's 10. All right, thanks.
Fantastic.
thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Silly question for you. Inspiration. Do you have a sense of what you're going to do before you do it? Or to what extent does it evolve along the way?
Oh, it's definitely material driven. Objects hold a lot of meaning to me, and I like to make materials. So a lot of times I'll be experimenting with materials, and then a piece will sort of come out of the materials, like that quilt with the Clooney tree wishes. I just started sewing them together, and then eventually that big giant circle just came about. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of experimentation.
They're amazing.
Hi,
I
Rebecca.
love the different themes and the.
Without the
Oh,
map.
sorry.
Go ahead,
I'm
Elisa.
looking.
So Rebecca, when you work on a piece like that, it's very involving. How do you know when you're done?
I'm a bit of a maximalist, so the reason why I put that piece up that was called Giacometti's hat. I have this story that my aunt told me about Giacometti, that he was not able to stop himself from cutting away, so his brother had to stop him. So I felt like I am the opposite, where like I will keep going. And so I guess when it stops is when I come into my studio and I look at it and I have to put it aside, but I will keep adding things. In fact, I go back to pieces a lot and add more stuff, and it's a new piece, you know.
So that's why Giacometti's sculptures were so thin.
Right.
That's the
Just
rumor
kept
my
cutting
aunt told
away.
me. Yes, and his brother said, no, stop.
I had a question, Rebecca. On any given day, how do you decide which type of thing you're going to work on? I mean, you've got so many different types of projects and things.
I feel like they all kind of connect in a way, just because they're all found objects or sentimental objects. So I just spend a lot of time at the ocean, so that's how I like fiber art, so that's how that came about. The public art is very easy to find, not easy, but I feel like that is the way I get the most exposure, and I find so many calls for public art that's something I like. And because I'm a welder, I'm able to make pieces that'll last outside. And so the other portion, the memory shrine, that's my favorite type of work, but I find the least amount of time to do it because I'm doing the other two styles. So I guess I always have 3 things that I'm working on at one time.
I really liked your that last piece, the one that you said you didn't have enough time to connect with. I thought that was really stunning. I was curious, what was the material you used? You know, I mean, it was the photo on the right, but it was, I wasn't sure if it was leather, studded leather, or what it was, sort of the interior. It was
Tell me which one, the hat?
the last one, the one that you said, it was the shrine. It was the one, it was hanging on the wall.
Oh, the dress, it was a dress.
Yeah.
It was a, so it's a dress I found at a thrift store. And the materials that I sewed to it were, like I said, the little bits of ephemera that people sent me through the mail. But I had found the round. Oh, so that is, I sewed over and over again. That's an example of like playing with material and figuring out what to do with it.
Okay.
It was pretty much jute that I took my sewing machine and just sewed them in circles and circles and circles.
Very good. I thought that was a really great piece. How do you spell Clootie? I'm just curious.
Well, I spell it Clootie, but I know that that's not the Gaelic way to spell it.
No.
It's probably Cloete or something like that. IGH, yeah.
I'm Irish, right? So.
Yeah, it's
no, it's very nice. No, I like, you know, I'm quite into that vernacular, and that's very nice. I like what you're doing with that. So well done. Thank you for sharing.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for participating and sharing your work with everybody. This exercise will continue once a month on the second Tuesday every month between 7 to 8. You're welcome to participate, and you're encouraged to present as well. Let me know. It's first comes, first serve. Right now, the schedule up to June is, I think, full. July, I opened July and August. So if you wishing to present, let me know, and let's schedule something together.
Thanks.
So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's a great
Thanks, Nick.
group, and spread the word. So I think that's perfect.
Bravo.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Yeah.
So fun.
Thanks, Fee. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. You have a good night.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for organizing it.